They said he couldn't win. And maybe, in another dimension, they were right. But this story wasn't written by Marvel. It seems perhaps this story was written by a Machiavellian puppet master, a grand coordinator of unlikely events. But was it really all that unlikely? In this case, hindsight offers its treasure of insight, potentially revealing an even more sensational story than previously thought.
When I learned he was going to run for office, I thought it was just something to get attention, and I didn't really take him seriously. And even when he actually launched his campaign, I didn't take him seriously.
And if you remember early on in the beginning, it was a joke. Nobody took him serious. Nobody saw him as a threat. Many guys, including Obama, Trump will never be president. They laughed at the idea. And when it really just goes to show how out of touch they were with the people, because Trump, hit the ground and got that support.
I don't think anybody thought he was going to actually win. All the news media and outlets, everyone kind of thought it was a little bit of a joke, is what it seemed like. It was one of the greatest upsets in the history of America.
The question on everyone's mind that fateful night, as America sat on the edge of her seat, was, how did we get here? Breaking news: Donald Trump is president. Even the ecstatic Trump supporters couldn't hide the surprise on their faces. The disparity between the polar ends of the spectrum was unlike anything we've ever seen. Who is this man who thinks he can run the world's most powerful country? And why would he want to?
I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
When recalling the 2016 election, one can hardly see the forest for the trees. Between the heavy throttling of information by the gatekeepers of knowledge we refer to as search engines, and the media pandering opinions as facts, we are left with a vague picture of what really happened. What caused this shakeup? How could an outsider like Trump situate himself in the center of power, prying the prize of the White House from the death grip of so many self-appointed heirs? The statistics simply were not in his favor, and yet Trump overcame the norm. In gathering statistics for a set of data, numbers that unquestionably stand outside the acceptable range are considered outliers. Some outliers are considered true, meaning they are close enough that they make sense. Others are considered false, landing so far outside the expected range that they are attributed to user error and then discarded. For example, a website developer might want to know the age range of visitors to their website to improve advertising. They would design a poll with the expectation of that range being from age 15 to 95. If a response came back outside that range, say at 7 or 102, they would be considered a true outlier. Possible, but uncommon. However, if the outlier is 1 or 137, it is clearly user error and thus discarded. These are the untrue outliers. Shortly into Trump's 2016 campaign, it became clear to the public that this man was an outlier. He certainly set outside the expected range. However, the lingering question on everyone's mind was whether or not Trump was an untrue outlier that should be discarded, or a true outlier, an anomaly requiring serious accommodation, and counted as a statistical fact. However, nowadays it seems facts are merely approved statements by powerful conglomerates and shadow figures with hidden agendas. Have we been given the whole truth about Trump? I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to let you decide for yourself. Why did Trump win? What was his proverbial Trump card? What exactly did we discover? Well, it's a big story, one that tells itself.
I had not spent my career as a politician, but as a builder looking at open skylines and imagining infinite possibilities. I came to Washington as the only true outsider ever to win the presidency.
I worked on the Reagan campaign when I was younger. I found out firsthand what politicians typically act like. They're always kind of positioning themselves for the audience. There is a move to create the division in America. Many feel disenfranchised. They feel like they've been abandoned by their government. They feel that they're at the effect of some unfair laws or unfair politicians who just want to get the vote, just are in it for themselves.
In politics, we look so hard for somebody that's going to speak on our behalf, and when we finally find somebody that does it, we put them up on a pedestal. And when we do that, when they disappoint us, we knock them off, we walk away. I think all of us are human. Especially in politics, we do watch for character. We do watch for integrity. We've all elected somebody and been disappointed.
To me, the American dream is being able to raise your family, being able to work where you want to work, whether it's entrepreneur and starting a business, or whether it's working for a company, whether it's homeschooling your kids, whatever it is that you want to do. It's not just white picket fence and nice car and all this nice stuff. It's not a materialistic dream. It's a dream of freedom.
Yes, being on American Idol, especially during the time frame I was on, it was 2009. Media was still mostly focused in Hollywood. And I was turned into a household name just in moments. You know, in many people's eyes, it was the American dream. I did get the record deal. I did tour. I think the American culture has absolutely shifted to the number one focus is being famous. It is now anybody has a chance. If your character doesn't support that, I think it's detrimental to our culture.
Well, I think if you look at just the history, the whole eyes of the world has always been on America. We're a melting pot. We have people that come, from all over the world. America is one of the most diverse, places there is. So obviously we've been doing something right. Perfect? No. But, people love America. People are always paying attention to what is going on. And, people love to come here.
The country is in a downward spiral. So we either stop the spiral or it continues and America ceases to be the country that we all grew up in. Argentina in the 1920s was the seventh most prosperous country in the West. And look what happened under Perón and what's happened since. Venezuela was the most prosperous country in South America. It went socialist. It has happened before. America's too strong to overcome from without. And so there's an effort to change it from within. It's scary, and we can't be passive and say it'll never happen.
What if I told you that Trump was not the first outlier on the US political scene? That some came before him who historically seem acceptable now, but at the time were considered highly controversial outsiders and dealt with many similar issues as Trump did with his run for office.
There was a man who, according to many historians, was a very unpopular figure. And if polling was done at the time that he became president, he would have had less than 40% of the popular vote. And of course, his name was Abraham Lincoln.
I mean, there's few things in America that will make you a part of history more than being president of the United States. Trump had succeeded in just about everything he tried, going all the way back to high school. Maybe he wanted to add being president of the United States. Are we going to ask if Roosevelt was motivated by that? What about Eisenhower or Truman or Kennedy? All these men had those kind of motivations. What about Reagan?
Reagan was another outlier. We look back on his story and find it amusing that he was an actor turned politician. But at the time, his run was laughable.
The manner in which the other team has been campaigning, it's time that some people were reminded that actors are people.
He enjoyed talking about the fact and professing himself as a B-list actor.
And yet, history reflects on him as the man for the job and generally praises his time in office.
I think that Ronald Reagan was a game changer. The Republicans had become very, very wimpy. There was sort of a muscular, masculine leadership style that Reagan portrayed.
During these last 4 years, not 1 square inch of territory has been lost to communist aggression.
I was in the audience listening to Ronald Reagan, and I realized that this man was a maverick. He was a maverick. That is, he wasn't so much concerned about getting the vote as he was espousing his ideas. When I saw Trump, that was the first time that I'd actually seen a politician that I thought was very similar to Reagan in that aspect.
Learn to cherish words like duty, honor, God, and country.
He wasn't just speaking to get the vote, he was speaking about what he believed was needed for the country. That was very, very unique between the two.
I've been listening to some of the things the governor says he'll do now in the next 4 years that he hasn't been able to do in the last 8.
Roger Stone, Trump's 2016 campaign advisor, makes an interesting comparison while speculating on his own life choices when he says, "I no longer wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be in politics. Little did I know how similar they are."
So we can question, we can speculate. That's what historians do after it's over. But I think that he loves America. I really do.
We must never forget that while Americans will always have our disagreements, we are a nation of incredible, decent, faithful, and peace-loving citizens.
I think that we can see it. He was in office for 4 years. He has a good record. I think he accomplished an awful lot of good.
Who all want our country to thrive and flourish and be very, very successful and good. We are a truly magnificent nation. All Americans were horrified by the assault on our capital. Political violence is an attack on everything we cherish as Americans. It can never be tolerated.
Interestingly enough, while there are many presidents who have been targeted for assassination, only a fraction have experienced an actual attempt. However, out of all the major presidents who are considered outliers, every single one has been a target. Those presidents were Abraham Lincoln, JFK, Ronald Reagan, and now Donald Trump. There is debate as to whether or not JFK was an outlier of any kind, due to the fact that his family was steeped in politics of the time.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Yet because of his active aggression against the powers that be, history views him as a different type of outlier. Simply that of one with many connections. Someone who was trying to break the mold. Perhaps even a black sheep.
Isn't it your responsibility to spark up this program?
When you say spark up the program, we first have to make a judgment based on the best information we can get, whether we can be ahead of the Russians to the moon. We're now talking about a program which may be, which are many years away.
Ultimately, at least to an extent, he was upsetting the establishment. Many people still view alternate theories about his assassination as no more than conspiracy theories. However, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Historically, JFK battled the CIA by pushing back against them, specifically calling them out on corrupt practices. In similar fashion, Trump also butted heads with the FBI over the Russian interference investigation. It is odd that both JFK and Trump fought against the letter agencies, then experienced questionable assassination attempts. Could this merely be coincidence?
There were so many mistakes made, and there's lots of questions around Okay, was it really a lone gunman? Was he acting on his own? Were the agencies involved in it? And I think we're right to question all of these things.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence, or any violence for that matter.
Recently interviewed a CIA operative, a former CIA operative, who said on air, couldn't have happened by mistake. You don't leave that line of vision open. To have that gaping hole, he did not feel was accidental. Even so much that it was an inside job. Now we can get into that another time. But it was horrific.
When I heard about the assassination attempt on Trump and that he was actually shot, I was shocked that it actually happened, but I wasn't surprised because I sort of saw this coming. And when we compare it to previous presidents, we do see a common thread there.
Politicians who stay in their lanes, the inliers, tend to have a comparatively quiet life.
You get shot at in a situation like that, you know, there's some kind of level of fear there. You're scared of losing your life. I've been overseas, been to Iraq, been to Afghanistan. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in your mind in that moment. And for him to stand up, you know, some people wouldn't have gotten up. Any person that's objectively looking at that, they know like that was a brave moment.
You've seen the videos when he just turned his head at the right moment, or the timing, and just, I mean, it was set up to really take him out, and he was protected.
Everything was lending itself toward him being assassinated, except for less than an inch or whatever of his turning his head. Happenstance in our world is something that is probably given too much credit.
We, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. We've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people.
The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
It's no secret the U.S. was in trouble on all fronts leading up to the election cycle of 2016. Threats of terrorism, authoritarianism, and potential conflicts with other nations had grown. To many, the economy seemed propped up and shaky at best, with only a facade of recovery from the 2008 recession. And some people were desperate for real, positive change. The booming 90s had officially died, leaving too fresh of a memory behind.
Being a veteran, there's certain places, the west side, the south side of Chicago, where, you know, it's so bad that that atmosphere you feel when going to Iraq. I never forget when I got to Iraq and, you know, we lock and loaded and we're getting ready to, you know, it's getting real. We're going on the other side of the wall. When you go to certain parts of Chicago, that same kind of warfare feeling is in the atmosphere.
Unlike in the 1900s, the politicians were no longer trying to keep their closet doors closed. Whether it was bold sex scandals or corrupt war schemes, it seemed they had grown accustomed to getting away with anything.
Former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay will not serve time behind bars for money laundering accusations that date back more than a decade.
Holder's approval of the Rosen search triggered calls from conservative and liberal voices for Holder to resign. The one thing Holder has been able to count on, the support of the president.
As presidential election cycles go, many Americans, as well as those in other countries directly affected by the American policies, were desperate for a candidate they could view as a hero riding in on a white horse. The politicians politicized, and the people groaned.
A lot of the people in Washington that we call the deep state are absolutely looking out after their own interest. I believe a lot of the members of Congress are. You know, you get elected to Congress, it's almost a career path to get rich. I mean, the statistics about how many went in with very ordinary salaries and they come out rich. They almost all come out rich.
People just got tired of the game. We'd rather just have somebody that's real and we're gonna see if something's gonna change, as opposed to let's just plan the game and prettying up and nothing's changing.
Then something preposterous happened that was comical at first.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
But when the laughter turned into awkward silence,
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
the world was struck with the strangest sense of curiosity.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
And a healthy amount of concern. Love him or hate him, the story of Donald Trump's rise to the presidency arguably follows literature's classic hero formula. Up until a certain point. Now, to be fair, some would relate the tale as a villain's origin story. Either way, what if Trump wasn't the puppet master over his own destiny? What if the facts actually showed a greater hand behind the curtain? One of providence.
And from what I could gather, Winston Churchill was bold, he was brash, and sometimes ill-behaved. And being so close to Trump's campaign in 15 and 16, I saw a lot of similarities. Winston Churchill gave up a lot of privilege. If you see the family palace or castle where he grew up, and he walked away from that to serve in the war in a bunker. I think he had a bucket for hygiene. It was very primitive. He did it because he knew what was necessary to save that nation. Bold, brash, ill-behaved. Because of him, millions lived that wouldn't have otherwise. Trump, bold, brash, sometimes ill-behaved. Thankfully doesn't listen to the protocol the way we've always done things. He steps out, he's done things differently, and I think millions have been saved because of it across the globe.
Is Donald Trump just another blip on the radar? Gum under the people's shoe? Or will he follow the same historical path that many famous leaders before him traversed? One thing we know for certain, his name is on the tip of everyone's tongue. Whether it's tainted with honey or venom, no one in our current time frame has talked about more than Donald Trump.
I think Donald Trump's win had to do more with the times. It has more to do with history. There's people who believe that when times are really desperate, a great leader will rise, a Churchill will rise, or even Roosevelt during the Depression. And I think that what's happened is that Donald Trump is the one who's risen to the occasion.
And I think what happened in 2016 was that all of these politicians looked like politicians. They acted like politicians. They spoke of the same things. And there was this guy who kind of stuck out. And he didn't speak like a politician. He didn't look like a politician because he wasn't a politician.
Well, I think that the thing about Donald Trump being an outsider is that he wasn't tainted by the system. There gets to be a groupthink. People in Washington, whether they're bureaucrats, and most of them are bureaucrats, of course, or whether they're Republicans or Democrats, they start thinking alike. We'd vote in Republicans. Nothing changed. We vote in Democrats. Nothing would change. And Donald Trump was an outsider, and people were desperate for something to change.
The first thing that I just felt about President Trump was that what you see is what you get. And I like people like that. Like, He's not polished, he's not a politician. Like, he's just saying what he feels.
You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the presidency.
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so
Doesn't matter.
far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
And whether you agree with everything he says or not, at least it's real.
You know, you started off over here, Jeb. You're moving over further and further. Pretty soon you're going to be off the end.
One of my biggest issues with, politicians is it's like they have like a camera face. Like, this is what we show you for the camera, but behind the scenes, I'm a completely different person.
I think Trump won in 2016 because simply he was representing the interests of the voter, actually bringing government back to we the people and doing what we want the government to be doing and protecting our rights.
I know my competitors. I know who I'm dealing with. They're politicians, all talk, no action. That's what a politician is, all talk, no action.
And not going off and pursuing special interests of his own interests or of his donors' interests. And he was speaking, exactly what my wife and I talk about at the kitchen table, or my dad and I talk about it in our garage, or whatever it is. I'm talking with my buddies at work. I mean, that is the way he talked from the platform at his rallies.
And I've really never seen a politician in my life who hasn't sold out. Maybe this is a guy who's going to be the exception. Maybe he's going to be the president who will work for the people because he's demonstrated it in his business.
Pre-politics, people admired Donald Trump, or at least respected him. He was known as a real estate mogul, builder, businessman, ladies' man, entertainer. It was not uncommon to catch a glimpse of the charismatic figure in the spotlight.
Anybody could go back 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, like everybody loved President Trump. He was like, he in a sense himself was a hood hero. That's why the lyrics, we're gonna get money like Trump and things like that, be a boss like Trump.
I kind of knew that he was this billionaire playboy, and he did this show, The Apprentice. He was kind of like the Simon Cowell of business. Like, he just said what he said, thought what he said, didn't think much about it. I didn't pay much attention at all to Donald Trump. He was in Home Alone movies. Thought that was great when he met Kevin in New York. As a matter of fact, when him and Hillary went to run in the race together, my initial reaction was, this is a joke. And remember that saying, mom says you could be anything you want to be when you grow up if you put your mind to it. I mean, that was like the going joke. I guess anyone can be president.
The 90s and early 2000s served as Trump's stomping grounds, driven by the American dream. During this era, American idealism was at its height. You could be whatever or whoever you wanted to be in America, especially if you already had money. However, it wasn't all fun and games over the years. Still, somehow, this icon managed to utilize even some of the most scandalous stories to his advantage. It was as if he had personally coined the phrase, all publicity is good publicity, and not much has changed. Before politics, even if you didn't like Donald Trump, you still wanted to know what he was up to. At the time, even celebrities seemed smitten with the Donald. His acumen for business slowly began to bleed more into the political, and it became clear that he had an invested interest in the fate of the country.
I mean, here he was, a playboy billionaire. He was a Democrat. He was a darling of the left back then. He was a darling of the press. And for reasons that are hard to understand, he saw what was going on in the world and in our country, and he felt he had to do something.
I've seen some past interviews of him on Oprah talking about the presidency. I didn't realize how much this man loved our country.
I would never want to rule it out totally because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings and we're not.
Despite solid rebuttals to inquiries about running for president in the 80s and 90s, Trump's actions seemed to have suggested a different story. Either way, he was obviously concerned with the way the country was being run. Could his interest be more than simple patriotism? A man like Trump was assumed to always have an angle. But regardless of any potential hidden intentions, something was unique about Trump's political interest.
Clearly, if you look at his early interviews, he had been asked a couple times, would he ever run for president? So obviously, people thought that maybe one day he would actually be a good presidential candidate.
You have flirted with the idea of politics. Now you're here at your first national convention. Does that get you interested in possibly making the plunge?
Now you have to tell me something. Who told you I flirted?
Well,
I didn't know that.
Trump had around $500 million to over $1 billion at the time. We're not quite sure because he's been accused of fudging the numbers when it comes to his estimated net worth. And despite being pressed by the media to reveal his worth, he remained firm.
Let's get back to the assessment of your wealth for a second. If you had to liquidate, how big would that check be that you put in your pocket when you headed west for the trailer?
Well, I hate to disappoint, but I have zero idea, David. How come this seat is at such a low level? I'm looking at it.
Whatever the number was, why would someone with that bankroll be tempted by such an apparent demotion? Wouldn't the race for presidency be a distraction from more financially beneficial endeavors?
A lot of politicians, they don't come in so wealthy. They come to the White House and then they leave wealthy. Trump, he didn't do it for the money. He had the money. And so you think that, when he did it, it was just because he loved the country. And so then for him to even come back a second time after all the fake news, the slander, the impeachments, everything that they've tried to do, it just to me says that he loves the country.
Look at all he's lost just by running for office. He'd been much easier, much better off to stay at his golf course, enjoy the life that he did, the pomp and the circumstance and respect that people gave him.
Presidents only make about $400,000 a year, which is, if you're working down at the factory, that seems like a lot of money, but it is not really riches. And somehow they come out millionaires and buy mansions on Martha's Vineyard and all that kind of stuff like Obama did. Trump, on the other hand, has sacrificed. His net worth went down. His family was attacked. In more recent days, he's been attacked with trials and lawsuits and all kinds of things that are unprecedented in American history.
Donald Trump is the only president that became more poor after becoming president. And I think that speaks volumes because I think he counted that cost. He knew that he didn't need necessarily the popularity because he was popular. That didn't matter to him. He was investing his own money for the first election in 2016, so he wasn't beholden to anyone.
I don't need money. So the beautiful thing is, I don't have people giving me, I don't owe anybody any favors.
Was it Trump's internal drive to conquer something new? Or was it as simple as desiring the spotlight on a major scale? Or is it possible that something completely outside of his own will drove Trump forward? In the early days of Trump's notoriety, he made his intentions clear about his political aspirations, specifically that he had none.
And you don't want it to be Donald Trump.
I do not want it to be Donald Trump, but I do want the problems to be solved.
There are a lot of people that they speculate will run for president. In fact, someone said that all 100 senators hum "Hail to the Chief" every morning when they look in the mirror, seeing if it feels right, indicating that the senators are always running for president and every governor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would lump Trump into that category.
The year is 1999, and Trump quietly slips into the presidential race after much back and forth between running with the Reform Party under Governor Jesse Ventura's sponsorship or under the Republican Party, where he would have to battle against then Governor George Bush.
I am absolutely serious about conceivably running for the office of president.
And he finally had enough, and I think that's what he said, okay, he has to run. And I think God put something in him to where he just had to do it.
And if I won, I think I'd be a really good president.
He eventually chooses the former, having a stronger alignment with the Reform Party, and even goes so far as to propose his ideal presidential cabinet.
You have a vice presidential
I love
candidate in mind?
Oprah would always be my first choice. She'd be fantastic. I mean, she's popular, she's brilliant, she's a wonderful woman.
Yet only convincing a mere 15,000 people to vote for him in the Reform Party's California primary. From there on, throughout the entire probing campaign, he remains on the fence, regularly reminding the public that he is not fully committed to running for president. And even though it may look serious, he is only exploring potential. His exploration process concludes as the Reform Party suffers internal conflicts too great to overcome, causing Trump to reconsider his involvement.
I'm not going to be running. The party is, as you know, self-destructing.
In February of 2000, Trump officially announces his withdrawal from the presidential race, fading into the political ether while remaining at the forefront of American culture. Accusations that his political interest is a publicity stunt splatter the headlines.
They say a job like president requires a big ego.
I'm not sure my ego is big enough. That's one of the things which I can...
Really? Can I write that down?
You can write it.
I don't think Donald accepts any bad press. I think just as long as you spell his name right, I think he's pleased. I think he sees it as a help to his business because there's also Trump the brand.
Not only does Trump gain attention, but his involvement in the Reform Party leaves a whirlwind behind that ultimately sends the party into irrelevant oblivion. A likely result, with or without him. Trump himself even denounces the Reform Party at the end of its demise, criticizing it as not conducive to victory. Was Trump merely testing the waters? Could he have been planting a seed for later? Or did he really think his persona and money was enough to overcome the power of the two-party system? Either way, he suddenly pushed pause on his political career. 2002, a famous televangelist pastor receives a surprising phone call. Her curiosity is piqued when her assistant informs her that Donald Trump is on the line.
He was watching Christian television and he called up and said, "Hey, you're fantastic," and repeated almost verbatim 3 of my sermons on value of vision. A friendship formed and relationship, not just with Donald, but also with his staff, with his family, with his children, with his friends.
Moments later, she agrees to fly to New York to answer some questions and ultimately becomes Trump's spiritual advisor. Perhaps, for once in his life, giving Trump a small taste of what it feels like to be the apprentice in the room. Pastor Paula White's story is the classic rags to riches tale, replete with miracles and controversy. Born in Tupelo, Missouri, 1966, she suffered the pains of poverty and abuse. At 5 years old, her mother separated from her biological father, which was followed closely by the eventual suicide of her father. White recounts having experienced a range of abuses until her mother remarried a 2-star admiral and moved the family to Washington, D.C. At age 18, she became a Christian, claiming to have received a vision from God to head up a national ministry. Armed with this vision, she worked in the inner cities of D.C., impacting thousands of people. But this was not without its troubles. Throughout the lifetime of her ministry, she has been accused of fraud, laundering, adultery, blasphemy, and general deception. They provided fuel for the rhetoric against Trump and his campaign years later as his advisor.
Televangelist White has a lot in common with Trump. Both are in their 3rd marriage and have endured decades of moral and financial scandal.
They labeled me muddy authenticity. I said, yes, I have mud on me. I go, some of it was thrown on me, some of it I fell down, but thank God for the grace of God.
Regardless of the history, one thing is certain. With Pastor White added to the Trump equation, events unraveled that some have dared to call miraculous.
He asked his friend Paula White to get some of her preacher friends together to pray should he run for president. He said, I'm not going to ask for their endorsement. And they got together. They had a time where they talked to him, and they prayed together for several hours. This is fairly well documented by people who were there.
Once that he made up his mind in 2016 to run for presidency, there was no stopping him.
Was Trump's partnership with Pastor White the key to his popularity with evangelicals? Why would this morally superior audience give a man like Donald Trump a pass, considering his questionable background? And what about the ones who did not give that pass? Unfortunately, a great divide occurred in the church at this time. Perhaps the better question is, what key did Trump hold that unlocked the doors to a Christian America? Or did he simply open a door that was always unlocked, one that his predecessors never even bothered to try? Or was this door bolted shut by former politicians wanting to barricade the American citizens from the promises of the Constitution? Trump takes pride in overcoming challenges that appear to be impossible. Could the presidency have been the next level up from previous challenges?
I don't remember the exact year, but when he was a businessman in New York City, they wanted to build an ice skating rink. And it took forever, and there were all kinds of cost overruns and all this kind of stuff. And he got the contract. It came in on time and under budget. You know, he showed up the bureaucracy. He's a leader. He does things. When he makes up his mind he's going to do something, he actually does it.
The silent years begin. Did Trump still have a strategy in mind? Some would say he acted like a seasoned illusionist, dangling his new 2004 reality show, The Apprentice, with one hand, while setting up his next trick in the other.
Do you want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact states, a woman's right to abortion?
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that that will go back to the individual states.
During this time frame, Trump shifts sides on certain sensitive issues, most notably abortion.
Right? Well, first off, in politics, we use the word flip. And any other time, we just talk about someone changing their mind or having a revelation. And so I think that's somewhat the case here with Trump. I believe he said it was something about a family friend and seeing someone grow up. And I think that can make quite an impression when you realize we're not just talking about a clump, as the left or Planned Parenthood would have you think. We're talking about a life.
Was this political strategy or a genuine change of heart? If we wanted to be crass, we would say that that answer lies between Trump and his publicist. Ultimately, though, it is between Trump and God.
Well, obviously, I'm very pleased that he's changed his decision to be more pro-life, and we saw from what he did his first 4 years in office, the judges that he set forward were constitutional judges that upheld some of the decisions or reversed some of the bad decisions that we thought needed to take place.
Roe versus Wade has been widely called bad law by many people on different sides of the equation. And in the era of Ronald Reagan, who was pro-life, he appointed Sandra Day O'Connor, who was pro-choice. And now we see Donald J. Trump, who's appointed some who are supportive of the rights to life, at least from a constitutional side for the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
These proceedings, I believe, lack legitimacy in the eyes of the people of our country. They are scared that allowing President Trump to jam this confirmation through would roll back rights for generations, scared about what it means to the future of voting rights, for climate change, and the right to a safe and legal abortion.
The Constitution says nothing about abortion, nothing. The Founding Fathers would spin in their graves to know that that was done. It should have always been according to the states. In fact, it was according to the states. There were a few states, New York State allowed abortion. I know that Washington, D.C., I know it's not a state, but if you ever watch the movie Roe v. Wade, they tell the story. I was alive when that happened, but I wasn't really aware of it. They decided to go for the big enchilada, and they just knew that fighting state by state by state was going to take forever, so they just took a chance before the Supreme Court, and it was a split decision. So Trump put in judges that just looked at the Constitution and they said the Constitution does not allow this.
Regardless, Trump in some ways began displaying Christian values. And whether real or fake, those values spoke volumes to the American Christian audience. Was Trump working under the commandeering of a higher calling, like many presidents before him had claimed?
Millions of Americans seek guidance every day in prayer to the Almighty God. I am one of them.
Or was this simply a tactic, spruced up with Christian lingo, in order to sway the audience? After a decade of tutelage under Pastor White, his stance on Christian values appeared to grow stronger and better defined. And despite his ultimate reasons behind running for office, there were those within the evangelical circles who predicted his presidency long before his official announcement. Could it be something beyond Trump's control or even comprehension was at work?
Now God sees a president that I will bring into the White House. They will say he is ungodly. God says the one that is chosen shall go in, and they shall say he has hot blood. Trump shall become a trumpet, says the Lord.
I found the Kim Clement prophecies, and I'm gonna tell you, I was completely shocked when I heard these prophecies.
I was pretty fascinated with the video of Kim Clement prophesying clearly about President Trump. And if you look at just the detail, but there's no denying that some of the detail of what he said has clearly come to pass, you know?
The idea that someone prophesied Trump's presidency ahead of time may sound like an extreme view to some, but you can't deny how strange of a timeline we're working with here. The clip you just watched was recorded in 2007. Trump didn't even announce his campaign until 2015. I'm going to let that sit for a while.
This week, I traveled to Chicago to deliver my final farewell address to the nation, following in the tradition of presidents before me.
The Obama era has ended. A new contender has entered the stage with ferocious opposition to core conservative values.
I don't think most Americans want the kind of divisive and dark change Donald Trump is offering. Rolling back marriage equality, defunding Planned Parenthood.
Who could oppose such a stoic figure with this much power and leverage? And what could they possibly do to stop her from getting what she always assumed to be rightfully hers?
Imagine him in the Oval Office facing a real crisis. A man you can bait with a tweet is not a man we can trust.
I don't have to tell you the difference between the left and the right. Some people are so entrenched that they never question their party or its stances. Yet not everyone is like that.
Well, I think that sometimes, you know, people are just programmed to think a certain way. You know, a lot of times if you ask people, well, you know, in that community, why are you voting this way? They can't tell you why. You know, it's just, I know I'm supposed to vote Democrat. So when you have that kind of programming already, it's hard to challenge that. You know, people they stick to tradition, they stick to what they've been taught. Well, my dad did this, my mom did that. And if people don't take the time to research for themselves, we know that the media is full of propaganda. We know that the media has a lot of agendas.
Some can still be persuaded. And the critical question that we're attempting to answer is, how would Trump convince the in-between crowd to lean a little bit? Could it be a socially liberal, fiscally conservative approach from Trump that would cause so many to swing their feet over to his side of the fence? Or was there something else that gave Trump a better fighting chance against a figure as big as Hillary Clinton? There was something rare about Trump that made the difference.
But there's an awful lot of people in the middle who are being won over because they don't like the way things are going in America. So we can question, we can speculate. That's what historians do after it's over. We can speculate, but I personally believe that he's a good man. I met him personally. I interviewed him. He was very respectful to me. There was no protocol that would have demanded that he do that, none. My impression was that during that interview, I had his attention and he was respectful. I expected that he would just treat me like one more member of the press. He had never met me before, but he didn't.
Trump took a stance as an anti-establishment figurehead. Would this last? Or would he become just another illusion of choice in the charade of politics?
A 100% it's real. There's no doubt about it. You know, people talk about deep state, Illuminati, Freemasons, and all of that kind of stuff. Essentially, the simplest way that I would break it down is like you're in the good boys club. A perfect example, you look at what happened with Hillary Clinton. I was in the military. How you handle classified information is important. And when they subpoenaed her and she destroyed the cell phones and the laptops, anybody else that wasn't in the good boys club probably would be in jail.
The way to prove that is whether or not someone took steps to conceal or destroy what they've done. That is the best evidence you have, that they knew it was wrong, that they lied about it.
It's very good evidence.
And when I think of the deep state, I think of the people behind the scenes who are really puppeteering, really who are getting things that they want done. And it could be people both inside these three-letter agencies, the government. It could be business people funding things and pushing agendas that they want and getting attorneys general elected in certain states, or all those sorts of things. The deep state is this behind-the-scenes cabal that is really pushing and controlling to get their agenda represented, which is ultimately going towards more control of the people.
Donald Trump, remember, he took on regulations, something that is usually not a campaign slogan. A lot of Americans probably haven't ever thought about regulations, but they stop so much of what we do. And I think that there was one book written about something about 3 laws a day or something, that you break laws that you don't even know exist because of all the ridiculous over-regulation from the bureaucracies, not even elected officials, but unaccountable bureaucracies.
Nearly 4 years ago, we ended this regulatory assault on the American worker, and we launched the most dramatic regulatory relief campaign in American history by far. No other administration has done anywhere near.
Well, a few years ago, I never heard of the expression deep state. And then when I started hearing it, we always heard it was a right-wing conspiracy or whatever. It's kind of entered our language. And what it is there's a permanent bureaucracy. They're unelected. They work for the departments in Washington, D.C., mostly, but other parts of the country as well. They have their jobs no matter who's president, and things kind of go their way regardless.
So there we are, unelected, doing unpopular things, and quite possibly wrong. Why should you ever give us your support? And that's the question.
There are people who we'll never see that have a lot of money, that have a lot of influence, and have a lot of power that will never be presidents, but they actually can control governments and control movements of presidents and world leaders and financial institutions and stock markets.
It's just this self-feeding thing that the Republicans don't want to be in power, because then they got to have some excuse why they're not doing what they're doing. And if they're not in power, they can blame the Democrats. And the Democrats want to be in power because they're pushing their agenda. And so you have this group, this uniparty, working together to stay in power and to enrich themselves and not represent the interests of the people, which is what they were elected to do.
What chances did this bull in a china shop have against a polished, heavily supported career politician who already had a foot in the door? It would take a miracle, indeed, to overcome this adversary. Hillary Clinton checked every box on the political qualification list.
It is my distinct pleasure and distinct honor to turn the microphone over to my friend, to my colleague, the 67th Secretary of State of the United States, Hillary Clinton.
Her resume practically guaranteed her seat in the White House. Having spent most of her adult life in the shadow of her husband, only to be transferred to the shadow of President Obama, she was determined to step into the spotlight. And she wasn't alone in this.
They anointed Barack Obama. They wanted to have the first black president, which is nothing wrong with that. But then I believe that in their minds, Hillary Clinton was already anointed to be next. Like, it was set in stone. We had a black president, now we're gonna have our first woman president. And it's like, it was almost like it was a done deal. Like, who's gonna run against the Clinton name?
Was the decision for Hillary to run for president the final cue for Trump to step up to the fight just a few months later?
I think he saw signs we're actually heading into a very dangerous place. We're closer to tyranny than we've ever been. And that's why I think freedom allows the American dream to thrive. If you don't have freedom, you don't have American dream. So I think he's fighting for freedom.
April of 2015, Hillary Clinton officially launches the I'm With Her campaign, sending the media into a swoon over the prospect of her presidency.
That's why I'm with her. That's why I'm with her. Are you with her?
In classic housekeeping fashion, Clinton is presented by the media as the northern star of the country's moral compass.
But for Hillary, one thing's never changed. Helping children has been a cause of her life,
while sweeping a multitude of scandals under the rug. While many hopeful Republican presidential candidates kowtow to Hillary or simply remain silent, one major player steps out of the shadows with conviction. It is at this moment a distinct line has been drawn, resulting in a country divided.
There are some people who will vote blue no matter who, and there's some people so far on the left, they would never vote for Donald Trump ever in a million years. You know, I mean, people that say they'll move out of the country if he's elected.
Perhaps his previous fallout with the Reform Party was the root of the reason for his Republican campaign in 2015.
And I want to run as a Republican. I want to be the Republican candidate. I think that's absolutely the best chance for winning.
Maybe Trump's switch to the Republican side was an attempt to attract the larger evangelical vote. Whatever the reason, he launched his campaign in 2015 as a Republican nominee.
Delegates and fellow Americans, I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
While the media parades Clinton as America's coming savior, the general coverage of Trump spotlights even his most trivial of faults.
And a lot of the bad that we think about Trump is really the other side just saying it over and over and over again. And after a while, the public starts believing in it.
Rather than reporting the news, it's almost as though they are writing it, whether intentionally or not. Most of the stories on both candidates are told from only one side, abandoning the true purpose of journalism. Instead of providing evidence both favorable and critical for each candidate, the media provides a conclusion, one that they expect the audience to agree with.
And if people don't take the time to research for themselves, we know that the media is full of propaganda. We know that the media has a lot of agendas. Back in the day when you were younger, the news, they should just give you, the news, right there on your phone, all this information coming to you fast. People just believe what they see.
In classic mud-throwing fashion, the media hones their reports in on the faults found in Trump, treating him like a false outlier, attempting to prove his illegitimacy. However, it's not like he doesn't give them plenty of material to work with.
To replenish the Social Security Trust Fund by making sure
agree with him on that. That's a matter of principle, and I'll tell you.
You are the single biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. You are the single biggest liar.
Not all be worried to have someone like that in charge of the nuclear arsenal.
Mr. Trump.
I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't.
Obviously, these are comments that some of us would prefer not to hear, or we wouldn't want our husbands saying, but here's the thing. You will have in your candidate what you allow in your culture.
Before Trump ran for president, I would have never considered him a good person.
It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you actually said that publicly, but a lot of people think it privately. Some of his behaviors, obviously the Stormy Daniels thing, that doesn't affect me, that doesn't affect my family, it doesn't affect my children. I'm not voting for a preacher, I'm voting for a politician. So what I'm concerned about is the legislation that you're gonna pass, because the legislation is what's going to affect my family. Could some of the things that he said have been maybe more polished or maybe slowed down and kind of maybe rethought the wording? Of course. But if we go back and we look at just the history of politicians in America, even with the Make America Great thing, people try to give it a negative racist connotation, but Bill Clinton was saying that when he ran, and people quickly forget that.
The media wants a Clinton presidency and wants the voters to believe they do as well. However, to the chagrin of the talking heads, one blatant statistic crumbles the narrative. Gallup reveals the latest poll for confidence in the media to be at a staggering 32% of people stating to have a fair amount of trust in the media. This is down 8% from the previous year and proves to be a new record low.
Because a lot of times to get in political power, you have to, you're doing favors for this person, you gotta make sure this donor is happy, like walking through a hallway of knives.
In politics and business, money equates to power, and following the money often reveals who truly holds influence. Political campaigns rely heavily on donations from super PACs and other sources. Most people are aware of this, but unaware of the influence and details hidden within these practices. Figures like the infamous George Soros, the self-proclaimed philanthropist who admittedly struggles with a messiah complex, exemplify this influence, with his multi-million-dollar contributions to Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, highlighting the significant role money plays in shaping political outcomes. And in addition, it's interesting to note the sway Soros holds over the media, with multi-millions of dollars invested into the mainstream media that splinters into the hundreds of media outlets across the world. One has to wonder just how impartial the general media really is. And to top it all off, Soros annually contributes tens of millions of dollars to the Democracy PAC, without exception, conveniently indirectly funding every Democrat nominee.
I was able to see through the names of media organizations that we so trusted. And it was the first time I began to actually question the narratives that were being pushed. And then I started seeing there was this whole spider web of things that someone had to do to get power.
You need millions upon millions and even approaching billions of dollars to get elected, certainly as President of the United States. So what happens is the candidate essentially sells their soul, if you will, to those who have contributed to their campaign. The only exception to that would be Donald J. Trump.
We are going to Washington, D.C., and we are going to drain the swamp.
Fueled by desperation, the left unloads a cacophony of allegations, ranging from the infamous mean tweets all the way to Russian interference. The barrage is relentless and ruthless. The unspoken rules of etiquette are broken by even the most reputable of politicians in an attempt to slander Trump's character.
Mr. Trump, he certainly would bring some change to the White House. All kidding aside, obviously we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience. For example,
who live a lifestyle more wild than Donald Trump will criticize him for his lifestyle. To me, it's the height of hypocrisy. And I don't mean to judge those people. I don't even mean to criticize them. I'm just trying to say there needs to be objectivity and a level playing field when it comes to evaluating Donald Trump.
I had a pastor come down on me on his comments, Trump's comments. And I said to the pastor in a phone call, didn't I just see you went and watch what movie, I don't even remember what movie it was at the time. And he said, yeah, I did, because he loved it on Facebook. I said, tell me, wasn't there a topless scene in that movie? And there was. And here a pastor of a church had gone to see that movie, but you're going to ridicule this president for something he said about women?
And yet, as his campaign surges, all of this doesn't seem to faze the man. Does Trump enjoy the spotlight to a degree that even slander cannot dilute? Or does he have a card up his sleeve?
The thing is that Donald Trump, if he doesn't like you, he'll say so. The people who object to our values are often bullies. And Donald Trump will do something that other politicians won't do. He stands up to the bullies. Do you see John McCain standing up to the bullies? How about McConnell? I mean, we could go right down the list. Most of them are just nice politicians who kind of play the game, and when they're attacked by people who oppose them, they play nice. They try to placate them and move a little bit to the left and hope that the bullies will leave them alone.
Susan Collins and Alaska's Lisa Murkowski, they joined McCain, crossing party lines to vote against the
I think it's a new standard that people came up with for Trump, that they say, oh, look at his past, we're not going to pay attention. And I say, well, I think there's more integrity in saying you're going to do something and then doing it than doing the opposite of that and not doing what you said and then actually stabbing your voters in the back, which is what a lot of politicians do, and people don't seem to pay attention to that.
But to nail one candidate over something that may or may not have been said 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that's political.
As Trump sweeps the floor of the Republican primary house, he pulls back the rug of the Democratic cover-up, highlighting some of the crooked deals made by people intending to take him down.
The administration loves spying on people's campaigns. By the way, could you imagine if it were the other way around and I spied on his campaign? What would these fake...
Of course, it's well known that the Clintons are dishonest. She destroyed 30,000 subpoenas. If you and I had destroyed one subpoena, we would have been in trouble.
What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out.
And there's all kinds of claims about the Clinton Foundation being dishonest. I mean, I could go down the line.
With each new rally, the same tactic is employed: expose the corrupt and flatter the people, sometimes to a fault.
You saw people get behind him across the nation because they were excited that someone was listening to their voice, to the voice of the grassroots.
We are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
One audience in particular shifts direction as the primaries unfold, diverting the flow of attention toward Trump and away from the remaining Republican hopefuls as they dissipate from the stage. Within the span of a year, many evangelical leaders transition from hesitant at best about Trump to decisively and publicly endorsing him.
Phyllis Schlafly was one of the first to come out and support Donald Trump, which surprised many. She said she had supported Christians and conservatives for a long time and nothing changed. She was one of those, when feminists were fussing about whether or not you could wear lipstick in the office, she was talking about Supreme Court justices. She's an attorney, she's brilliant. She was concerned about a policy in America. And so for her to get behind Donald Trump was no light weight. It shook a lot of people.
Like a trickle turned into a flood, major spiritual leaders pour their support into Trump, bursting the dam. Whether reluctantly or passionately, the same general message of endorsement is echoed across a large percentage of evangelical pulpits. Trump is God's choice for America.
It's a true mixture of politics and religion. Last week, First Baptist Dallas pastor Robert Jeffress shared a stage with the president. Jeffress was a strong Trump supporter.
He is also part of the overwhelming evangelical support that helped propel the president to...
In response to the rapidly increasing support from the evangelical population, the media publishes polls that appear to decimate Trump's chances of gaining the White House. With each new endorsement is a new poll favoring Clinton, showing a stark contrast between statistics and rhetoric. November dawns, with each new rally growing in attendance. Every step forward on this journey to the White House stirs up another controversy leveled at Trump. If the roadblock isn't a personal attack on his history or his character, it's a practical tactic to either throw him off course or minimize his social impact.
Race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for.
However, strangely enough, nothing seems to stick. In fact, the allegations seem to do quite the opposite.
They've thrown everything they can at him, everything. But he's like made out of Teflon. You know, I think he's gifted. I think he's strong. I think some of it's the times. He's rising to the occasion. But I also believe that there's a supernatural aspect to it, too.
Could it be more than Trump's winning strategy of relating to the average Joe? Is his expediency to the Oval Office truly commandeered by a higher power? Election night. The Clinton campaign has spent a small fortune on renting out the remarkable Javits Center in Manhattan, where it awaits her certain victory with suspended confetti and balloons beneath the expansive glass ceiling. Meanwhile, Republicans gather in a nondescript and dark location, awaiting their demise with grim faces. A moment that, as we now know, would turn on a dime.
I believe that she will win. I believe that she will.
In an almost comical inversion, the world watches live as cheerful Clinton supporters' smiles turn into weeping frowns. Trump supporters awake from depressed slumber, faces alight with surprise and revived enthusiasm.
And they just had cameras on all the teams, the people who set up the parties, the faces and the surprises. And then the news media, when they heard the news that Donald Trump had won, I mean, the reactions were about as genuine and as real as you can get. They were shocked. It was an operation of shock. Shock and awe. People just could not believe it. I woke up the morning and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that he won.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you. It's been an honor. God bless. Thank God.
Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
Regardless of what one believes about the election results of 2016, history shows that Trump won by the electoral vote. Since then, many on the far left have rallied to remove the electoral process, claiming that a popular vote would better represent the American people's decision for their president. So why did the forefathers create this unique system of the electoral vote?
When it comes to the Electoral College and the popular vote, we need the Electoral College in the US, because if we just had a popular vote, the 5 major cities or the 10 major cities is where all the presidential campaigns would go, and those are all liberal cities, and that's what we would have in our elections, and we would always have that kind of leader, and that's the only place they would ever campaign. And that's not representative of America. That's not representative of the United States. The way the Electoral College is set up is so that they have to appeal to everybody and represent all interests.
But now we see politicians who are saying, oh, we need to expand the court so we can place more Supreme Court members who are of our particular ilk. In congressional races, we need to redistrict so that those districts are more favorable to our party. And in the presidency, we need to maybe, and it's been suggested, change the electoral system or the means by which we count votes or allow people to vote, whether they have to show ID or not. So that's in the discussion of changing fundamentally the way that the Republic has operated throughout much of its modern day history.
If you understand what our forefathers experienced and you understand what they knew, how governments can turn over time, I really feel like in our Constitution, they put in the language to protect us and to keep in mind. Now, they had to fight for freedom, so they knew what it was like to not be free. We're in a generation that has never had to fight for freedom. We live in a generation that has everything at our fingertips, so we tend to get bored quick. And since we get bored quick, what are we doing?
Perhaps Trump connected the historical dots all the way back to the founding of America and recognized the building blocks that God-fearing men put into place at a much different time of desperation. Did Trump see the same battle cry in this country today that the Founding Fathers heralded in their time of radical challenges?
My pledge reads, I'm with you, the American people.
A cry for freedom to reclaim the quickly fading promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And was this appeal sincere on Trump's part? Or did he simply recognize the need and use it to his advantage?
This is no longer about people answering up to him. This is about him answering to the people. In America, our Declaration says it, they govern at the consent of the governed.
And that's why people resonate with Trump, is because he's actually putting government back in its place.
It is time to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C.
We don't want this big inflated thing that's controlling everything from what's on your dinner table to what kind of regulations you need to be able to run your business and having their hands in everything. And that's really what resonates with people is getting us back to the way it should be. And whether they can articulate that or not, people have a sense, people have an intuition that that's the direction he's going and that's the direction that we need to go. It just clicks into place like a puzzle piece.
And he started talking about stuff that nobody else would talk about. And people resonated to him. There was a great groundswell of support.
Regardless of what Trump may or may not have understood as he entered the Oval Office, he got to work immediately. Winning the White House was not the same as winning over the country. The outsider was now inside, where the playing field is much less visible to the public eye. Because of the constant pushback from the inside players, Trump made famous the use of executive orders, using his presidential powers as his main tactic of making good on his campaign promises. This caught the attention of the media, who painted Trump as a dictator that pushes his agenda through means of executive orders, conveniently leaving out the fact that Trump utilized this method significantly less than many of his predecessors. Historically, Trump ranks at number 17 out of all the presidents for use of executive orders. Granted, this is only a representation of one term in office, but even doubling his number, that rank barely skims into the top 10. So why did Trump utilize this practice so much? What was he trying to either do or undo that caused such a ruckus?
And then I saw this man use his celebrity and use his business intuition, and he reshaped America. I'm talking about in the first year, we saw massive results. It was the first time I realized that, oh, you don't need someone with a 40-year political record. You need someone who knows how to actually do things and do them right.
But why was this an important factor during this era in history? Recall the days of yore, namely the 90s and early 2000s, and how easily one could refer to them as the Trump years.
The American people are speaking because Donald Trump is a poster child for the American dream.
What was so compelling about Trump that he was enshrined as the portrait of the American dream?
You know, the American dream is one that is an aspiration for those who have fled environments where there was not opportunity to earn a better life.
There has never been a better time to start living the American dream.
My mother's from Germany. When she came to the States, we were living in a shelter. I saw her work her way up, create her own business, go to school. Unfortunately, there are people in America now that the American dream is something different. Go to America for the handouts. You don't have to be accountable for it.
To every citizen watching at home tonight, no matter where you've been or where you've come from, this is your time.
In discussing opportunity and optimism in America and how minorities in general had less access to these ideals, the at-the-time student Barack Obama co-wrote an essay that flippantly used Trump as an example of these aspirations, claiming, quote, "I may not be Donald Trump now, but just you wait. If I don't make it, my children will." The paper was ironically a chastisement of the American dream.
If you work hard, then you can dream anything.
If you put your mind to something, if you study, do the discipline, that you can achieve it.
You can come, and if you put the work in, you're going to see some success.
But what does a series of executive orders have to do with the American dream? And why President Trump's specific ones? When this country started, the founders had a plan, and that plan involved one major factor: freedom. The natural enemy of freedom is regulation.
That is all under attack today because they want to have more control.
When they put healthcare into the government's hands, we warned about insurance premiums increasing unspeakably, and they have. No American should be in this situation. And that's overregulation, that's government. If we let free enterprise be free, we'll see it soar.
As the United States matured, it did so with increasing regulation. Of course, with a country expanding to the extent that the US has, regulation would become more and more necessary. But how much is too much?
Between the cost that it is to incur starting a business, it's almost unattainable for a lot of folks.
So Ronald Reagan said this. He said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Because government regulations were compounding. And that was very analogous to the way it was when Donald Trump, when he was elected. He wanted to free those regulations.
A recent poll done in January of 2024 shows a stark decline in the hope of achieving the American dream. Confidence in the American dream dropped from 50% in 2010 down to 27%. Is the American dream dead? And if so, can it be resurrected?
I think God's hand helped shape what the American dream would look like. First of all, I think freedom is God's idea.
You still need help from the boss. We need help from the boss.
But we need the help of God in freedom to keep, because there's a cost for freedom, and to keep freedom alive, there's a price tag. And I think many of us have forgotten what that price tag is to maintain freedom.
If the American dream represents the freedom to be a people of integrity and character, then perhaps it is worth resurrecting. And if it is worth resurrecting, then what does that look like?
The philosophy of Donald Trump was no, government can't help the people. The people need to be helped by increasing their ability to succeed in life.
And we know that families and churches, not government officials, know best how to create a strong and loving community.
And what about the state of the nation? Do we really deserve a dream of a better tomorrow to hold on to? Or is it finally time to just give up on the fantasy of the American dream because of the many mistakes that we've made in trying to see that dream become reality?
This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
We have people in our country who are harping on the mistakes our country has made. If I memorialize the mistakes of my wife, it is the end of our marriage.
If we went back through our history books and looked at our founding fathers, I think we might be sorely disappointed in some of their actions. But what they left us as governing documents were priceless and set this nation on a course to be a light on a hill.
The American founders invoked our Creator 4 times in the Declaration of Independence.
I think most of us would agree that America has always been predominantly a Christian nation, and we've had Christian values. Have we done everything perfect? No, but you know, the principles of what this country is founded on has been the Bible, right? And we should protect that.
That's one of the things that I admire about him, is he stands up for our values.
I think when people look at someone like me who votes for Trump, who supports Trump, they actively put these labels on someone like me. I believe that our country was found off biblical principles that are proven throughout history to work. Many people don't know this about me, but my wife's family was kicked out of our country because of politics and communism, and they were exiled of our country. I think I have a little different of an experience than most people do. My mother-in-law works at Walmart. When she was raised in a lap of luxury, wanting border control just means I want order. As a whole, we want to protect our nation, and hopefully, because of border control, we're letting the good ones in and we're keeping the bad ones out that want to hurt and that want to do bad things to people.
We lock our doors at night because we don't want people to come in that are not legally coming in. And so we should do the same with our border. There is a legal process. Even for asylum, you come through a port of entry. We have a Congress and a government that's willing to protect borders of other countries, but not our own. Trump was right to talk about this, and the left seems to have a difficulty distinguishing between legal immigration and illegal immigration. I mean, my wife immigrated from Brazil in 2015. We met in 2012, and we dated for 3.5 years, including engagement. And 15 trips later, she moved to the US, and she eventually became a US citizen. Absolutely, you can be pro-border control and pro-people and pro-immigration. And that is what will help America thrive. But we need to do it the right way.
One of the biggest issues I have personally against Donald J. Trump is maybe a lack of sensitivity. As a Christian, as a believer, I know that we are to have compassion for all people. You know, even though his language and mass deportations and things to that effect can be a little scary, and it's a little scary to me, because some of these people are people I know. Some of these people are people I love. One person who came across the border illegally, I actually helped to get his green card and then his citizenship. I had compassion because I got to know him personally. But I think here's the hope. Part of it may be a talking point, and there you have to go to what he's done. After his first term, we didn't see some of the things that he was talking about. We saw instead a more moderate approach.
I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital, because this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that. But it also has to be a bill where we're able to secure our border. Drugs are pouring into our country at a record pace.
I think he surrounded himself with some of the people like Ben Carson and some others who were speaking into him a little bit more the voice of those who didn't have a voice. Now, that being said, I think there's still room for improvement.
America is very welcoming, very open. We want people to come here. I mean, it's a melting pot, and that is part of what makes this nation so great, is the diversity of thought and all the different backgrounds that people come in. And you meet these people with just incredible stories of moving here, becoming successful in their own right, and raising a family and doing what they want to do. And that's part of the American dream.
I think somebody said that the Nobel Prize winners, most of them have come from America or been educated in America. And I think it's that freedom. I think God made us creative in his image. He's a producer.
People are valuable, whether they're in here legally or not illegally. My conservative values support that. So when I wrote this song and I wrote those lyrics, Lady Liberty will always be a sign of hope unto the refugee. The immigrant can find escape from oppression to a better place. More than anything, that is my hope for people in general. Our country, formed by man, inspired by biblical principles, has provided that. We've worked through some really difficult times and didn't always get it right. If we start at the good parts and we memorialize the good, that's the beginning point for healing.
As a conservative, I believe we need to stand up for our rights. We have a constitutional right to vote. We have a constitutional right to change things. And if we're just passive, we may lose that. But really what's important is eternity. Who's in the White House, the kind of government we have is not that important. Everything we see around us someday is going to pass away. And what is important is our relationship with Jesus Christ. I believe that we need freedom so we can preach the gospel. We need to be able to tell people that Jesus is the way to God, regardless of who's in the White House.
I don't want people to remember me for being a conservative at all. I want them to remember me as a person who loved God and loved people. Doesn't mean that being a conservative is a bad thing. Get what I'm saying here. The most important thing is that I had the likeness of Jesus. And Jesus, everybody in this world needs a person like Jesus, even if they don't know it, because that's what's going to heal our world.
Well, I know people that aren't going to vote for Trump no matter what. I have a few relatives that fall in that category, and I realize we have to agree to disagree. Hey, this is America. And, as a Christian, that allows me an opportunity to show the love of Jesus.
Thanks for watching this film. I hope you enjoyed it. Since we've given you about half a year of our time making this film, I'm asking for you to give me a few more minutes of your time. So I know that we obviously talked a lot about Donald Trump and the 2016 campaign, and in some spaces in this film we talked about God, and I want to talk to you now about what I actually believe about God. And this is actually part of the reason I made this film, was to be able to share this with you. So I know there are many people watching this film who believe a lot of different things about God, whether he exists, whether he doesn't, whether this religion's true, that religion, or whether they're all the same. And as we go through this life, I understand that what we believe about religion and about God is probably one of the hardest decisions we have to make. But I want to share with you the story of what God did for me over 10 years ago. So I was in college and I was in this place in my life where I was severely depressed. I was severely anxious and very isolated, very alone. And I felt like I had failed myself, my family, and that in some senses I had failed God. And I had this constant sense of this guilt and this shame that hung over my life. And it didn't matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of it. And as I began to read the Bible, I was still in this place of depression, of anxiety, of like bitter hopelessness, getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night because of my emotional state. And yet this small amount of hope began to dawn in my heart because I started to read about this man in Scripture named Jesus Christ. And I began to read about the things that he did for us at the cross. And I thought, could this apply to me? And I remember one night where I was laying on the floor and I was praying and I was doing my best to seek God, like I had read in Scripture. And suddenly, out of nowhere, this voice began to speak to me in my heart. And I had never heard it before that moment, but I knew without any doubt at all that it was the voice of God. It was the Holy Spirit. And he began to speak to me and he said, Troy, I love you despite your sin. And up to that point, I had heard people tell me, God loves you, right? But I had never truly believed it. I thought that if God was there, I would, for some reason, have to earn his love. And I thought for a while that I was, and then suddenly I messed everything up, right? And the next thing he told me was, because I love you, I sent Jesus, the Son of God, as a man to die for your sins so that you could be forgiven right now if you only believe in him. And as soon as he said that, I chose to believe it. And something happened in that moment where immediately I went from this state of depression and anxiety and anger and fear and this heavy weight of guilt. All those things began to fall off of me. And suddenly, I wake up the next morning and all I could sense was joy. All I felt was joy and freedom and this amazing love that I had never experienced before that. And the reason I made this film, yes, I support Donald Trump and I believe in some of the things he's doing. That's part of the reason. But the other reason is so that I could simply share this message with you. The same God that I met that night as I lay on the floor in my dorm room, he wants to know you as well. And he's made a way for you to know him. And that way is through Jesus Christ. See, politicians, they can change some things, but when you meet Jesus, he changes everything. Maybe 4 more years with someone like Donald Trump in office would be good for America, but whether you put your hope in Donald Trump returning to office or in him never being in office again, no matter which way you go, our hopes in this world are always eventually dashed because nothing lasts forever. But God is eternal and he has eternal life that he wants you to be able to spend with him. And the scripture states it this way. It says, this is how God shows his love to us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. See, sin separated us from God for eternity. That's what the Bible clearly says. And yet God loved us so much, he didn't want us to be separated. And so he made a way for us to be completely forgiven and to come back into his family, to know him again. And that way is through Jesus Christ. My friend, I'm not going to pray a prayer today or anything like that, but I want to leave you with this truth because this is the truth that changed my life overnight. And the last thing I'm asking for you to do is to simply pray about this. If you've never read the Bible, I encourage you to read it. See what it says. See the promises for yourself. And my friend, I know that if you respond to those promises like I did over 10 years ago, the same God that I met that night is going to meet with you as well because he loves you and he's reaching his hand out to you no matter where you are, no matter what your past looks like, no matter where you've been. He hasn't given up on you. Don't give up on him. I hope y'all enjoyed this film. Thanks for watching.